So on the subject of the role of the president, I think it's been a huge talking point over the past few weeks. As you know, what the president can or cannot do, as set out in the Constitution, and the law minister has come out quite explicitly with his view about where the law stands on it. So I want to ask each one of you, first of all, whether you agree or disagree with the law minister's position on this. I don't think I need to go into the details of his explanation. I think you must be quite familiar with it. So whether you agree or disagree with his interpretation of the law. Secondly, if you agree with his interpretation, because that's what the law says, do you believe that those are the correct duties of the president, or whether you would have preferred the president to have been given greater powers? If you disagree with his interpretation, can I ask which part of the interpretation do you disagree with, and if you are elected president, how would you reconcile your disagreement with the way you play out your role as president? And maybe for this question, let me start this way. Go ahead,
Well, when you said the position of the law minister, I was just wondering which position you're referring to. At the IPS forum, he said something. The next day, over the weekend, he said a different thing. And yesterday, I read in the papers about his position on the role of the president with regard to reserves. So it's a bit, there is a series of views that he has said. So, but we must view...
Hasn't he been consistent?
Yeah?
Hasn't he been consistent?
Well, he has a bit... Consistency meaning that you cannot do anything apart from what is specified. But he did say something that, you have to give due respect to the president as well. That part, he was quite strict. On the Thursday IPS forum, the president will only be respected by the prime minister is of someone of certain caliber, of certain wisdom, and all that. But later on, I think it's as a result of Dr. Chan Chek-wok's comment. He did say that, he has said certain things, and I think there should be mutual respect. Isn't that your point, Dr. Chan? So it's a bit of a backtracking on the law minister's part.
Can we focus on that part of his interpretation where he says that according to the Constitution, apart from the custodial role of the president has to act in accordance with the advice of the cabinet? Can we focus on that for the time being?
Well, there are certain things, like on the death penalty, for example, his role is quite restricted to what the Constitution said, that the president has no choice but to sign on the death penalty, the execution order. That is very clear. And, if the Constitution is very specific, then the powers of the president are circumscribed. But that doesn't prevent the president from making his views heard on the death penalty. I would prefer, before I sign the execution order on anybody, to have a full debate on the issue of death penalty. And I think we have to argue it out. Since the death penalty was imposed, society has progressed. Have we become a less civilized society or a more civilized society? I would like to have the debate, and I want every MP, every minister who say yes to death penalty, that he is saying so with his conscience clear. And only when Parliament has fully cleared his conscience, then I will sign the execution order with conscience.
But which part of the Constitution allows the president such remit?
No, he can say things. You can't shut the president up. As Mr. Tan Kin Lian said, he is not a dumb president.
So can I press you on this point? So if you were elected president, and obviously I think your position on the death penalty is that you are against the death penalty. Supposing you were against the death penalty and you were elected president, would you speak out openly against the government's policy on the death penalty?
My position on the public debate is that I would engage the government first. And when I raise it in public, it will not be a surprise to the government that the Prime Minister doesn't wake up one morning and see this thing as a headline in the Straits Times.
So you warn him beforehand.
It will not be a surprise to the Prime Minister. He will be fully aware that what I will speak, and I will give him the full respect that he deserves.
You don't think you'll be acting unconstitutionally?
I don't think so. The Law Minister is not the ultimate interpreter of the Constitution. The Law Minister is an interested party.
And you don't think that will set up a path of confrontation between the President and the government?
It is not confrontation as such. Disagreement, we disagree. We agree as adults on the death penalty. Do I confront you? At the end of the day, if Parliament tells me to sign, I sign. Is that confrontation? Do I say, I disagree, I tear the sheet of paper in front of your eyes? No, I will sign if Parliament is convinced, has a clear conscience.
Can I go around? Can I have Doctor? Okay, all right.
On the part of the Constitution where it's clearly written, then I agree with the Law Minister. But on the part that is not clearly written, I hold a different interpretation. Now, the Law Minister says that there's a particular section where he says, in the execution of his duty in the Constitution, the President has to take advice of the Cabinet. Now, that part, I think that was his message, and he seems to imply that the President couldn't say anything at all except with the approval of Cabinet. Now, that part I disagree. Now, I said there's no requirement for the President to be dumb. That means I think the President should be able to say things on charity, on non-confrontational issues without having to get approval. All right. Now, when it comes to the part that is more difficult, let me then deal with this death penalty. Okay, the death penalty requires the President to take the advice of the Cabinet. Now, I would prefer the Constitution to be changed. If the Cabinet wants to decide, let the Cabinet take the responsibility to sign the death certificate. Let the Prime Minister. Why do you have the Cabinet make a decision and ask the President to put his signature? Of course, this is something that requires the Constitution to be re-looked at. Now, even under the current Constitution, I'm not going to just sit down and wait for the Cabinet to tell me to sign. I would want to give my views to Cabinet so they take my views into account before they make the final decision. So the President can still play a role even under the current Constitution to give his views. Now, of course, in order to give my views, I do need to know what the facts are, and you need to know how was that processed. Now, that would be difficult for the President to do alone, but today we are in the era of the Internet, the social media. There's a wide range of opinion that is being fed, and it's possible to get a sense of what many people think. And that would reflect, I think, the views that the President can take, and the President can give that view to Cabinet before they make the final decision.
I think we have to work within the Constitution. Currently, if I'm the President now, and I see something which I don't quite agree in the Constitution, I will probably inform the Cabinet, or I will actually warn them. And that is the inherent right of the President, or the head of state. And I honestly cannot say that I'm going to disagree with you openly. I think as a President, I shouldn't do that. Because sometimes we posture ourselves too strongly. Then there will be a confrontation developed between the President and the government. I think this is not the position we want. I think honestly we want to work mutually. Although I took offense very strongly to Shanmugam's remarks about the Prime Minister will talk to the President depending on the level of respect that he gives to the President. That I took very strong offense. That's why I wrote a letter to the press. Because both the President is elected, the Prime Minister is elected, we all have been supported by Singaporeans. Therefore, the respect must be mutual. But having said that, I still feel that I don't want to develop a confrontation attitude with the government, because at the end of the day, the most important thing is the interest of this country, the interest of the people of Singapore. And I think we've got to start at the right note. So that's the reason why I was very angry with Shanmugam, because he started the stage of he set the stage for confrontation, which is not good for the country.
Well, I think the Constitution is very clear. The responsibility and the power to run the country is with the government. The President has very limited powers under the Constitution, except in the case of custody of our reserves and protecting the integrity of our public service, and certain limited areas like detentions and sentences. Now, having said that, the President, by virtue of his office and his prestige, in my view, has influence. He can exercise his influence through his example, through the causes which he champions, through his encouragement of issues like encouraging welfare, sports, culture. He can help to mold and bind our society together. So it's not true to say that the President has no power at all. He has, in a sense, moral power, which depends on how he conducts himself, and I think that's very important. Of course, one can imagine different types of roles for the President, increased powers, but that would require an amendment to the Constitution. Amendments to the Constitution can only be done by Parliament, and presidential elections is not the right forum to debate amendments to the Constitution. People must run for the office of the President that exists, not for the office which they may want to have. And people who want to change the Constitution to alter the powers of the President should run in the next general elections, not in the presidential elections.
I would like to give a reply to that point. Now, I agree with Tony about some of the causes that the President can champion, but I think the one that touches the heart of most Singaporeans is how is my life? Is my life easy or difficult? And we know that Singaporeans have to struggle. They give their views in the general election, but not so well reflected in the Parliament. And I think these issues still continue to be very important. And I want to be able to bring attention to these issues, that we need to change the situation in Singapore so that people can have look forward to a life that is better. I'm old enough to know what life was like 20 years ago. Low cost of public housing, wages were adequate, and people could have more time and they could have bigger families, children getting married. Today, life is quite difficult. We are seeing that in the declining birth rate, and I think those issues are also important. I don't think we are going to wait for another 5 years for another general election. It's going to take too long. So I hope that the President can play that role. And in that respect, I would disagree with Tony about what can be done.
But I disagree with him.
Sorry?
I don't agree with him.
Okay.
Please
speak up.
He's involving day-to-day politics, which is not within the Constitution. I think we must be very, very clear. As I said, this is not a general election.
So what do you see is the greatest danger if Tan Kim Tian's views
I think
prevail?
what he's doing is bringing local day-to-day politics into the presidency. That should be the role of those who have been elected, like those in the opposition, those in the PAP in Parliament. They should be bringing out those issues. As a president, I have to make sure that the decisions, for example, on a particular policy, if it affects the Singaporean, I will step in. I will not veto. I cannot veto, but I can issue a warning. And if, let's say, they don't agree with the warning that I've issued, it will be reflected later on at the general election. But as I can see it now, I must, as the president election, we must stay clear of all this day-to-day politics, or else we're going to confuse the Singaporeans.
Can I make one comment, and that is, I'm particularly disturbed by Mr. Tan King Liam's comment that the concerns of Singaporeans are not fully voiced in Parliament. Our 87 members of Parliament elected during the May general elections are elected by the whole of Singapore in 87 constituencies, 81 for the PAP, 6 for the Workers' Party. The members of Parliament are the elected representatives of the people of Singapore. They voice the concerns of Singapore. They make legislation. They change legislation. To say that the 87 members of Parliament, both on the government and the opposition side, do not reflect the concerns of Singaporeans adequately, I think is a show of disrespect to Parliament and is, in my view, very, very wrong. We have to respect Parliament, which is the foremost and the top legislative body in Singapore. The President has an entirely different role, and one must not confuse the role of the President with the role of Parliament. The President exercises his authority, but Parliament makes the laws. The government sets the policy, and this policy is debated in Parliament. And I think the situation is very clear. One must give respect to the proper organs of government. Otherwise, there will be confusion.